Record. Hello, everybody. It is January 30th, 2025. Got to practice saying 2025. It's a SIG Network regular call. We are governed by the code of conduct. So as usual, please don't be a jerk. We have a fairly light agenda today. In fact, we have basically no agenda except look at the KEPs today. So if you have something that you wanted to talk about with the group, the agenda doc is open and is linked from the calendar invite. Please feel free to throw yourselves in the agenda. In the very short term, let's look at triage. I loaded up the main window, but I did not actually start doing it yet this morning. I'm sorry for that. Let's share the screen. Share a window, this window. How about now? Okay, cool. Let's look at these tests. Flaking tests, external traffic policy, local, should only target nodes with endpoints. Let me load up a few. 3 days, last week, 2 weeks ago, 2 weeks, all the way back to December. Let's start with these. SIG Network load balancers, ETP, local, should show only. Antonio, of course, is on it.
But this Dan commented, this was raised in the chat, and it's complex. It's one load balancer takes 1 hour and it failed once in 1 week. I'm not saying that. The main problem that I saw is that nobody is keeping the Cloud Controller Manager up to date. So what we are really testing, if it's a problem in the cloud provider code, we are testing the version 30 instead of the current version.
So what do we do with this? What's the next steps?
The next step is somebody managing the cloud provider DCP need to get this up to date.
Okay.
You can feel free to tag me on it because we have some folks looking at it. Well, I am tagged.
The other thing is that there is this migration from the, what is the name? Registry, Artifactory, I don't remember, the internal DC name.
DCR to AR.
Okay, those things, and I don't know if these budgets or where this is stored is going to be impacted or not.
Okay, Bowie, if you can take a look and then route it. If we need to shake the tree on Cloud Controller Manager, I'm happy to do that.
Okay, yeah, just assign it to me. You did it.
All right, I did. All right. Service selector does not recreate all required endpoints when a pod has this one when a pod has multiple containers. So Antonio and I looked at this one a little bit. This user is trying to have a pod with multiple containers where the multiple containers have ports with the same name, which shouldn't have been allowed, but is allowed as a bug, I think anyway, and was expecting the service to pick both endpoints for the named port. So they set their service front end port to choose a back end by name, and then they were surprised that it only picked one per pod. So I explained, sorry, I'm sharing my screen. I explained the sort of assumption of fungibility, like we assume for service that all of the endpoints are going to produce the same result. They pointed out that that's not really documented that way. Anyway, what they're really trying to do is collect like metadata about various RPC services and sort of like metrics, I guess, and publish it all through a single service, like a headless service, so they could go and collect all of the endpoints. And we just don't have a way of representing this today. That's not how services work. So I followed up, and we'll see if they like any of the answers or not. Anybody have other thoughts they want to talk about on this one? It's an interesting bend on the usual use case. I'm not sure that we have what they want. I'm not sure that we want to have what they want. All right, I'm assigned to this one. Unable to use Kubernetes service cluster IP with IP NCAP IP. I have not looked at this one. Has anybody looked at this?
Yeah,
Doing something mildly unholy. That's a very honest bug report.
No, the issue is well explained, and he's very polite. So he's trying to find a solution to his problem, but he's not trying to push. So basically, he wants. I don't know if Magic is here. He wants a service IP route. So he wants to route traffic to another pod based only on the IP, because the interesting routing thing is the encapsulated IP. So it seems that he's trying to do some kind of pod acting as a border router or something that encapsulate traffic. And of course, with services doesn't work. At the moment that you encapsulate with IP, you lose all the port and protocol properties, so the proxy is not able to do anything.
Okay, it's a long report. I'm not going to read it here.
The good thing is that he wants to do some kind of IP route, services with cluster IP only. That is the same that people want with some of the people want with the all ports. But this is a nice project for using IP address.
Okay. So you're saying it's a feature request? You want to just remove
Yes.
triage?
It's a feature request. You can, I mean, this is one of the weekend projects. You can, if you have a nice API to indicate the IP and the backend, implementing is not complicated. You just need to get the packet and send to the other pod.
I'm not sure everybody has the same notion of weekend project that you do, Antonio, but okay.
Yeah, this is look. If they just want to do that, is getting the packet in one pod and sending to another pod.
Is this
The
a
thing
Kubernetes feature that they want? Like you marked it as feature request. Is it a service feature? Is it a gateway feature? Is it?
For me, the difficult thing here is to come with the right API. And in all the all ports kept and issue, Dan made a good analysis, and a subset of people is asking for this. Other people is asking for other things. So I know that this functionality is asked. I also think that we have some internal people asking for something similar, to say, I want to send traffic to this virtual IP and this go to some pod. So I know people want it. It's not a lot of people, but I know. The problem that I see here is to make the right API for this.
Is this more like the egress route stuff?
It's kind of right. It's because you need to. It's like a service that you only publish the cluster IP.
All right, I'll read this one over. I've already marked it as triage, and you've already marked it as feature. Unfortunately, we mark it as triaged and don't assign. Like, if nobody's working on it, it's just gonna get stuck. I don't think it's consolation for the user that we accepted their feature if we're not actually doing anything with it.
For me, the key is the API. If somebody can come with a nice API, I'm happy to help them to have a prototype or something.
Okay.
So
All right. All right, I will read it over just so I'm aware of it.
Would a new API like that need a cap?
Absolutely.
Wow.
Cool.
Well,
Okay.
it depends on where it's implemented. If it's part of Gateway, then it would probably go through Gateway's enhancement process. But
If
yes,
it's in core, it'll be cap.
Don't send me a PR without having discussed the API beforehand.
Gotcha. Makes sense.
That's why I'm saying the tricky part is the API.
Okay. Long-lived TCP connections fail when downscaling kube proxy with ETP cluster. Let me look at this one. Antonio's not. Oh, I did respond to it. This is around node life cycle. They're routing through a node, and they're unhappy that if that node gets decommissioned, they have no real warning about the fact that their connection is going down. they're also not using the kube proxies health checking to say whether things are trying to remember the details. Yeah, the taint that we added to indicate that this node is probably going away, which uses kube proxy health check. They're not using this, if I recall. It's on AWS, and I didn't see. That was just a triage. Okay, and then another failing test, which was health check node port. There. Oh, that's cute.
Which one?
I love these sorts of bugs. This is from December, so is there something more we can do here? I don't know. Okay. Do we want to look at more, or should we go to the agenda? We're going back into December. There are lots of issues open here. Let's leave it here for now. Actually, small number of untriaged issues, which is pretty nice. Anybody who feels like looking at this, I saw there was an update to the FQDN one this week. Was that right, Dan? Or maybe I saw you.
I added an agenda thing about that.
Perfect. Okay.
I think
Okay, then let's switch back to agenda. I'll stop sharing. Stop. Agenda then says we have KEP review. Do we want to run through open KEPs? We kind of did this last time. I think we're happy with it, unless anybody has news.
Yeah, I have two news. One
Okay,
is
go for it.
the first, the short one is there is a KEP, and I think Bob is in the call, right? That is about adding TLS to the gRPC probe. And I really think that it has to, most of the people I know use gRPC services with TLS. So having the insecure TLS option seems a good thing for, it also has parity with the HTTP probe.
Okay.
And what I don't know is it wasn't added because something that I cannot see, or it was just.
No, I see it now in our dashboard. It's at the bottom.
I
of
added
our,
it just.
Great. There's no automatic process that adds them to this list, unfortunately. If there's a way to do that, I don't know what it is. So TLS support in gRPC probe seems like I mean, just from the title alone, seems reasonable. Who's reviewing that?
I mean, I could take it, Antonio, if you're. If that's why you mentioned me.
No, I mentioned you because you have the historical context. I don't mind to.
Oh, I
to
see.
drive the
I think
test.
it just was not added because we didn't consider it at the time. Whoever created the gRPC, it looked like they had the basic functionality.
Yeah.
That's
So
what I'm saying.
Bowie, I'm happy to assign it to you if you want to do it. You know, I'm trying to get more people to do API reviews up front if you want it, or if somebody else wants it. Volunteers. Otherwise, I'll just throw it in the back of my queue and get to it if I get to it.
Yeah, just send it to me.
I signed it to drive it to the person. He started with a more complicated approach of adding certificates and all the stuff, and I told him to just aim for the parity with HTTP. And now I need approval from Node and from you, team, and for the API review. If
So I'm
somebody
trying
wants
to,
to drive it, I will be happy to hand it over because it's less things that they have to do.
yes, that's my thinking too. Actually, I made a promise to my boss that I was not going to do API reviews without having API shadows on them. So I'll put it in my queue. I'll send it to the group of people who have sort of volunteered to shadow API reviews. But Boy, since I think of all of us, you're the closest to it, maybe you want to take the first pass.
Okay, it's Antonio. Can you just ping it to me, or if it's on the dashboard?
It's
It's
on
in the
it's on our dashboard. It's at the bottom. Let me mark it as next. I will say next alpha in 33 is the goal. And now it moves it to the top of the list. Okay. And the other one is the cluster domain downward API, Antonio.
Yeah, I spent a lot of time trying to, find all the possible paths, and I found this kernel capability on the EUTS namespaces that is called domain name. So it's calling. Well, I don't know if it's exactly domain name, the exact name, but well, it's just so good to be true that
So my understanding of that field is it's not the DNS domain name. It's more like the NIS domain name. Like it
yes, it's
comes
exactly
from
that.
Sun, right?
Yeah. So that's what I'm saying. We have an orphan thing that nobody uses that is called domain name, and we want to put domain name in some place. So
Okay. I'm happy
I
to
see
look
a
at
lot
it.
of alignment there in the
I,
stars, and
it seems sort of it's equal parts smelly and clever.
yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's so good to be true that I don't know if there is something wrong that is going to break or not.
Okay, I will have to think about it. If anybody is familiar with the kernel's implication of domain name, speak now. I could sure use your input. Otherwise, we'll go off and try to learn about it. Okay. Anybody wants to look at this one? Otherwise, I'll just assign it to myself.
The main reason why I push it that is because Docker is using it. So that means that we are not going to be the first. That for me is
They're
always.
using it for this.
I don't know exactly. I need to check.
Okay.
I mean, they were the ones pushing the OCI spec to include domain name. So now it's part of the OCI spec. So it's not something that you need to go and to the namespace and tune or whatever. It's just an option of the runtime. So that's what I'm saying. It's a clear boundary. It's not that we need to
Okay.
hack our way around. We just need
Do you,
to pass an option to the runtime.
so the obvious question is, if Docker supports it, that means Containerd supports it. How about Cryo? Does anybody know?
I already opened the issue to the cryo people. I'm just waiting to hold on that. I mean, I want first to make sense. If it makes sense, I'm confident I can plan all the ecosystem to support the same option. But
Okay.
what I don't understand is, as you say, it's hacky and smelly and all the stuff, but
I mean, look, the fact that Docker is doing it sort of clears the way for us a little bit. If they've managed to make it work and not break lots of users, it's probably the case that we will be okay. Not guaranteed, but it certainly helps.
I like that it's namespace and
Yeah.
it has an API from the runtimes. Those are the
Yes.
things that are my pushing.
I mean, a long time back, we had this idea of evolving the DNS schema so that we could possibly have two different cluster suffixes, one for like the new schema that is sane and one for the old schema, which is insane. And then on a per namespace basis, you could choose. So the fact that this is namespace means different pods could get a different answer here. Right. We're not doing that work. We're not doing that work at the moment, but we could. Imagine a pod said by opting in, like, I want Kubernetes DNS schema v2, right? It'll get a different, instead of cluster.local, which really we should not be using .local, it would get cluster.example or something. And it would have, instead of something, service name.namespace.svc, it might get service name.s.namespace, which would be a more natural hierarchy, right?
Yeah, but
Anyway, but we can't make that change compatibly with the n dots and everything else that we've done. So if a pod were to opt into schema v2, then maybe the n dots would default to 2 instead of 5. But again, it's a big project. I think it's possible, but it's got to have somebody who cares enough to drive it. And right now, there isn't anybody. Most of us have worked around the n dots stuff, but if somebody was really shaking their fist angrily at it, I would say, hey, look, I've got some ideas. Maybe you could explore them. It's in the category of work I'd love to see somebody else do, not me. Okay, Dan, endpoint slice semantics. The floor is yours.
So this is a second order spinoff from the deprecating endpoints KEP. I filed a PR to port the aggregated API server over to endpoint slices, and Jordan reviewed it, and it turns out there are all sorts of things about endpoint slices that we just sort of assume that aren't actually true. So I was trying to update the docs. It just needs some review. Probably Rob should look at it too. That's
You
it.
want to give us a sneak peek on where do we mess up?
Like the thing that got me in the review is that I assumed that port always had to be non-nil in endpoint port, but it does not. API server validation allows you to have a nil port, even though there are no defined semantics for that, and kubeproxy will ignore it.
Cool. I mean, having spent a lot of time in the validation code lately, that's not at all surprising to me.
Oh, this was intentional though. It's not an accident.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there's all this extensibility in endpoint slice that we are not using and possibly will never use, but it's all there in the API definition. And so that's what this PR is sort of trying to.
I see. Okay. Cool.
And maybe we should change some of that if we think it was unintended.
I mean, changing validation is really hard. One of my side projects is making it easier to write correct validation and harder to write incorrect validation. And in doing so, we realize how much incorrect validation we have. It's very difficult to go and like bulk convert the existing validation to these new mechanisms because the new mechanisms are stricter, and that would be breaking changes, and we can't do that. So like validating IPs versus validating sloppy IPs, like allowing those leading zeros is a great example, right? Where nope, we just have to keep allowing those zeros. We're going to work on building that ratcheting in so that we can, weed them out over an indefinite amount of time.
There's a cap about that you need to review too.
It's in my queue. Yes, it's in my queue. I was just adding things as we're talking. I'm adding those two that Antonio added, putting them in my KEP window, which is already 40 tabs long. So I will try to get to it. I promise. Okay, thanks for exploring that. I will look at it. All KKPRs are prioritized behind KEPs right now. So
it's not urgent. I mean, it's just documentation changes. So.
Yep. Okay. Other agenda topics. We're at the end of our agenda. So. Oh, sorry, Gaurav just added one.
Yes,
Great.
I just added one thing. This is the PR which Dan has sent out. Sorry, Dan, I have to go. I'm yet to go through all the comments. I was just curious, like, I see towards the last, you proposed 4 options, 2 of them being that we rename or not use the prefer clause and move on to something like prefer node. So is there something in particular why we don't want to keep something like prefer clause and only have something like prefer node? Is there some reason why we can't have both of them? I mean, I know it's possible some of the comments may be answering it, but I thought maybe if we have time over here, we can just bring it up.
So yes, you should read through the discussion. It's not saying get rid of prefer close and have preferred node. It's saying rename prefer close to prefer same zone and also add prefer same node. The argument being that because we failed to come up with a way that we could make prefer close sometimes mean prefer same node, that means that it's not really about prefer close, it's about prefer same zone. And so we should just be honest.
I see. And this is us talking about the kubeproxy implementation, which can only handle like prefer zone right now, right? And for the foreseeable future.
I mean, read through the comments. Like
Okay,
basically,
I'll do that.
it seems like trying to ever make prefer close mean anything other than same zone is would run into problems. So
All right, sure. Thank you.
I want to go back to, I will go back and look at it. That one's also in my queue, but near the front. Because I really want to convince myself that it's absolutely not possible to just bend prefer close to mean, sometimes it means prefer node. That's an implementation choice. A node is closer than a zone. So is the risk of that really worth adding a second policy that we then have to keep forever? That's the part that I want to focus on.
and the thing I think we can avoid false positives on that, but I think we couldn't in order to do that, we can't avoid false negatives. Your same node services will sporadically revert back to same zone, even though you didn't want them to.
But that, I mean, that is implied in the word prefer, right?
Right, but it's not doing it for a good reason. It's doing it for bad reasons because we had to be extra careful so that we don't accidentally force prefer same node semantics on somebody who didn't want it at all.
This is because of the daemon set related linkage.
Yeah, like the making sure that you really did intend to deploy an endpoint to every node. And so like, when you're rolling out an update, like, oh, well, it's on all but 2 nodes. Maybe you didn't mean same node. You just meant same zone. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't
All
know.
right. We
Somehow need to come up with a way and define how that the same node will operate without confusing the prefer close, right?
Well, if you
well,
add,
go ahead, Dan.
I was
You
gonna say,
answer.
if we add the new, label prefer same node, then, then we know for sure that that's what you wanted. And so we don't have to worry about confused heuristics. The question was whether we could have heuristics that were good enough to not need a new label. And yeah, read through. People had arguments. Maybe
Sure, I
you don't agree with all those arguments, but
okay, it does make sense. I'll go through all the comments and that should be
Yeah.
helpful. Yeah.
So this came up, we were discussing earlier, all the KEPs that our Google people are pushing forward, and I asked about this one. So Gaurav, please take a look. If you can poke holes in Dan's argument, please do. If you're convinced, then please say so, and we can decide to move forward, since you're closest to the routing stuff.
Sounds good. Thank you, Dan, for the PR.
Awesome. Anything else? We have agenda. That's the end of our agenda. Anybody have anything else they want to bring up? We got roughly 2 weeks to KEP freeze. PR freeze is 1 week. Okay, it's not a freeze. John just sent out a note, right? It's not a freeze, but really you should have your stuff ready for PRR within the week. Anybody else have topics? Okay. All right, then maybe we'll just end early, give everybody a half hour or 20 minutes back. Speak now or forever after. Okay, great. Thanks everybody for joining us. We'll see you all in 2 weeks. Where's that option again? I stopped the recording. Stop.